Okay. Welcome, everyone, to this afternoon's Fireside Chat. Today, we'll be talking about the future of collectibles, particularly as digital assets. I'm Jackie. I'm your moderator for today. And joining us is Rob Petrozzo. Rob is the co-founder and chief product officer of Rally, an investing platform with a mission to provide access to collectibles by offering fractional ownership to enthusiasts of everything from classic cars, rare comics, to designer handbags. Rob comes from the design world, and in his prolific design career has worked with the likes of John Legend, Young Jeezy, and DJ Drama, to name a few. Yeah. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is Aditi Maliwal. Aditi is a partner at Upfront Ventures, an LA-based venture capital firm that focuses on early-stage funding and whose portfolio includes startups such as ThreadUp, Goat, and Rally. Before joining Upfront, Aditi was a product manager on the Next Billion Users team at Google, in a hybrid role leading investments in and building product for companies in emerging markets. She recently joined Rally's team of advisors and board members. Welcome, Aditi.
Thank you.
So we shall begin. Rob, how did your vision for Rally begin?
I think it started the same way. I think a lot of businesses and a lot of new ideas come to life where it starts with the need for you and for your friends, and it's in the conversation. Myself and Chris and Max, my co-founders, we've always been collectors to a certain degree, but I think that when you're young and you don't have a lot of money and you're trying to figure out the things that matter to you, you wind up spending money incorrectly and buying the wrong things. And we realized there was this huge group of enthusiasts like ourselves for all these individual asset classes. So whether that's comic books or it's classic cars or it's handbags or it's watches, but the best stuff is always way, way out of reach. And I think in 2013, 2014, everything was about starting to be about curation, and Instagram was starting to get big, and everyone was really going for an aesthetic that was like 80s and 90s. And we were all sitting down one day having coffee and talking about what we wanted to do together. We wanted to work on something. And we were seeing all these headlines nonstop for these huge auction results and these massive $1 million things were happening. We were still on the outside looking in. I think it was a natural progression of that aha moment where we realized these were things we really cared about. It was liquid in the conversations we were having, but we weren't able to sort of get the best stuff. And it kind of led to a slow and then steady progress toward the first demo of what would become Rally, which started with classic cars, this huge, huge group of enthusiasts that love it, but the best stuff is way out of reach for a regular person. And then it backed into now 23 different categories of all these things that we and the users on Rally and our investors really love. And we're doing that fractionally by allowing everyone to have access to it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm curious about how you came up with the idea of having a tangible asset, like a collectible, like a classic car or comic book, into that could be like invested in as a fractional share.
Yeah. So a lot of it is dealing with really, really good lawyers early on when we have a great idea and we put it on paper and we made something. We kind of built it out where we thought like tangible goods, in my mind, were going to be the future of investing. And Chris and Max felt the same. At that point, 2015, when we first launched and we're first really putting this idea on paper in a more tangible way, Robinhood was kind of becoming this thing, like the wait list was out and it was starting to turn into this app where it was really about democratizing equities. Coinbase was in its infancy to a certain degree, but cryptocurrency was also a huge conversation point. And there were these two platforms for retail in Robinhood and in Coinbase that you could tell were going to become these ubiquitous platforms that everybody was going to have all their stocks and all their equities on Robinhood, all the kids our age, and everyone's going to have all their Bitcoin and all their Ethereum and all their crypto on Coinbase. And in our minds, there was always going to be this third one where it's going to be all your alternative assets, everything else, and starting with tangible goods, which are the ones that regular people always gravitate towards. When you see a watch or you see a handbag or you want to have a conversation around like an auction result, it's always for this tangible good. Those are the things that generate the most conversation and really have like a heartbeat. I think that's what's missing from a lot of the platforms that came before us that were trying to democratize other types of asset classes and intangibles. We knew that if we wanted to do this and wanted to do it successfully, we had to find that lane where it's things that people really, really care about, but have this trajectory and this track record of big returns that outpace a lot of regular equities and sort of, outpace inflation and can outpace the S&P. So it has that investment worthiness. Do it with museum assets and find that third lane outside of just equities and crypto.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And I think Aditi can attest to this, that you have a unique background in the fintech space particularly because you come from an art, design, and product background, leading product builds for different companies. What was your journey like from designer to founder? What skills have you found translated to learning about a specific niche and being a founder? And is the process to solve problems in any way similar?
Yeah, I think that when you think about design, and especially my generation, so it's like the late millennial. I'm trying to hang on to as long as I possibly can.
The aging millennial, we all
the
are.
aging millennial. So
Yeah.
as an aging millennial, I'll tell you that when I first started design, and I went to school thinking that art was going to be like a career and that was an opportunity, and it is, but it requires a type of, I think, it requires breaking through a lot of lanes that I don't think I was fully equipped for when I got out of school in the 2000s, in the mid 2000s. But what happened was, this idea of being self-taught and learning new skills and sort of being a designer and also being an entrepreneur and trying to do as much like freelance work as possible and trying to meet as many people before social media really existed the way it does now. I think it allowed a lot of people around the same age as me who came out of school with a design background to move with the trends and move with the times. So now it's 2006, 2007, and the iPhone's out. Then the App Store kind of opens, and now you have a bunch of sort of vertical marketplaces starting to pop up in the late 2000s, early 2000s. And as every designer, everybody in product at the time, and Aditi could probably attest to this too, like everybody became a product designer really quickly. And like you were talking UX and UI more than you were talking about printing material and graphic design.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. I think we all remember that.
Yeah.
100%. And then everyone had to kind of learn a little bit of code because you had to like spin up landing
Right.
pages.
For sure.
And then slowly, I think everybody that was in that lane that was a designer or was working in product in any capacity kind of backed into this role where it was physical and digital, which is what kind of opened up the door for what we do now too at Rally, where the whole idea is that you have these physical pieces that have these massive, incredible stories that go with it. To bring it to life, it requires a little bit of a design eye in my mind. And that's where we've always sort of hired and built a team, whether it's on the content side or the ops side or even the finance side, where everybody thinks about this as sort of a product-first company and as a product-first exploration of all these assets. And that's kind of been really, really helpful for me over the course of the last 10 years for sure, but definitely the last 5 or so as we built out Rally.
Right. Because there's not a lot out there that is product first. Like you
That's
mentioned.
it. It's tough too. You have to. This is a product very much like so many of the apps and the products that are inside Upfront's portfolio, where it's about the user experience first and it's about storytelling first. So launching Rally, we didn't ever want it to. When you literally launched the app, we didn't want that to ever feel like you're walking into a bank and that it's about a transaction. We wanted to tell the story first. And even though that means putting up 1 or 2 extra steps before somebody can spend money on Rally, we want to make sure they understand the story and why these elements and why these items are important before they get there. So we never thought about transaction early. It was always about design and storytelling.
So design, storytelling first, and then transaction later.
Always.
It's really interesting. So this question is for Aditi. What was the original investment thesis that got the Upfront team excited to invest in Rally?
Yeah, so I think Rob kind of touched on this, which is, the rise of Robinhood and sort of the rise of digital assets or intangible assets has kind of, we've seen it sort of go through its boom and kind of we're seeing all kinds of fluctuations in that market now. But I think the idea of owning a little bit of a tangible asset, something with a heartbeat, as Rob said, is pretty spectacular. And I also think what really is differentiating about Rally as a product is it's kind of democratizing what was for the elite, what was for somebody who couldn't necessarily afford to get, I mean, most people can't afford a Picasso, or most people can't afford a Birkin. But hey, saying you own a 10th or 1/20th or whatever percentage it may be is still pretty cool in saying like, yeah, I own some part of a highly valued asset. And I believe that at some point there will be liquidity for this asset. But more than that, I want to be an owner. And I think we as millennials, and Rob talks about this too, is there is this mindset around obviously entrepreneurship, around the hustle culture, but really there's also this conversation and this theme around ownership and sort of being owners in businesses, being owners in your own identity, and being owners in tangible assets, whether it's art, whether it's a fancy car, whether it's a great piece of art, whether it's a comic book series that your dad loved or your grandparents loved, or that baseball card, whatever it may be. I think that holding value and the ability to be a true owner is something that Rally gives access to for anyone out there. It has made it so accessible. Now, I think what Rally also does a good job, and this is kind of what also got us excited, is creating the feeling of inclusivity with also the cool factor, or like a relative, like a sense of this is rare and we want to be inclusive and give you access to it, but it's still a rare asset. So you should accept it and appreciate it for what it is. Because I mean, I guess if everyone owned a piece of a Picasso, like, would we still value it in the same way? Probably. I don't think it would go away, but I think appreciating the rareness of the product itself was something very cool. And then I think they've just done a phenomenal job with design and creating a user experience that everyone wants to engage in and have a true, it's almost like creating a better version of E-Trade or TD Ameritrade, but really getting to do it with assets that you can eventually possibly see, potentially even, if you were so lucky to have that much money, purchase yourself.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that is so unique, and that is this tangible asset that is unattainable to most people. Like, most of us can't afford that Lamborghini or that Rolls Royce, and this is democratizing, right? And inclusiveness, and I hear that. So back to, you mentioned Aditi with the design aspect, you know, coming with Rally, how it is unique. So as the Chief Product Officer for Rally, this is a big question, but what is your intention with the design and user experience of the platform? And how did you want it to be different from other investing platforms?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, we're going through a redesign now with the app because so much has changed over the course of the last four years or so. And every design has its shelf life where it has to sort of go away at a certain point. We've kept so many of the elements that people wanted, and our core user base has always been so vocal with us about what they want to see. And, you know, if you let the user base design by committee, it might not be what you want it to be, but a lot of the elements, a lot of the things they bring up, we've always made sure we're part of the app. So there are elements from day one, like the carousel that we use to browse assets, the paginated storytelling inside of the product page that we've used from the beginning, that we really based a lot of it on what apps that weren't finance apps were doing early on. So the actual app is based on an app called Maple. That was a food delivery app that David Chang and a few other people built really early on, that it sunset a long time ago. But it was always about, like, you know, it was delivery of healthy food, and it was really, it was priced correctly where it wasn't trying to gouge you. Everything was really transparent about all the ingredients that were used in it. And that, to us, was kind of like, I was looking at that app and I'm thinking, this is exactly how we want to tell this story right now, is think about all the ingredients that go into an asset, an item that's on Rally, and tell those in such a way that there's a passive push to make a purchase inside that process. But we know that if we can get somebody to really care the same way we do, or if they know a little bit about it and they can do kind of a deep dive inside Rally, we know that transaction will happen without us having to throw, you know, a buy now in their face. And I think that the luck and kind of the way we designed this early on was based around the idea that, you know, you have to be a little bit lucky and predict the future a little bit, that at a certain point, everything will be transactional, but it'll be way more seamless and way less about, like, buy now, there's a discount code, or go do this right now.
All those gimmicks, right?
That's
all the
it.
Tricks
We were trying to stay away from growth hacks as long as possible, basically. And I always looked at it like, you know, when we're thinking about bottom line, we're thinking about the product and how we're making money as a business, you always have to keep it in mind, but we wanted to make sure it was 50-50, where users creating a conversation and us leading that conversation into a transaction was going to be the way we designed the app. And I think we did a really successful job early on. At a certain point, it doesn't scale with almost 500 assets inside the app. Now it's time for new discovery and new explore pages and new home screens. And it's doing something that really feels a lot more like a museum than it ever did the transaction. I think that's a big part of what we're building now, and all the tangible stuff that we do, whether it's our museum space in New York, or it's pop-up events, or it's having people into our headquarters to really browse the assets and bringing teams together that know about Rally but want to learn more, and showing them what each of these assets actually are, is an extension of sort of everything that we do inside the app. So every email, every tangible gift, every piece of merch, our store website, which does really well on its own independent of the app, all that is kind of built around that same experience of storytelling before a transaction.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're creating, like you said, that narrative and that space to have that museum quality and the community with, you mentioned, quote unquote, passive, like, hey, you know, now's the time to invest, press the invest button. So back to that, so you know, we touch upon the heart, right? The element of storytelling, emotional impact, and pull of nostalgia. You want to create for your users from a moment they learn about your platform and went to their exploring and trading shares. Talking a little bit more about that, creating that experience, like with how do you create community or narrative?
Yeah.
Like, is it just intentional design with every
It-
aspect?
Yeah, it always starts with conversation, and anybody from a product background will tell you, like, if you're just guessing and not listening to users and not having the conversation, you're gonna always lose on that. So for me, even early on, I was giving out my phone number to anybody who would take it in 2014, and still now. There's legitimately probably 2,000 or 3,000 individual users of Rally, like our super users, our first 2,000, who still have my phone number, and they'll still text me and DM me and give me feedback nonstop. We have one or two, especially in California. They'll do like a one-paragraph email every 2 days, or a text with some really long-form copy of what we could be doing better every 2 or 3 days. And I've always kind of talked to our team about making sure that we're as responsive as possible. The customer service experience outside of the product has always been the most important part of what we do. And that's always where we've gotten the highest marks. So even in times where, like now, where you're going to have, pullbacks across every asset class, you're going to have people that are looking at this from a binary, I lost money, I'm mad about that, the product is the reason. That's true. Like, it really, even though it's not true, you have to look at that in a way where it's empathy first and it's conversation first. And we've always thought about the way we interact with our users, not as customers, but as people who are going to inform the product. And I think that we did that really well early on, and even now with the way we communicate in-app and the way our customer service team works, the way that we kind of include them as much as possible. And we're doing way more of like the Zoom sessions now with experts who come in and will tell you more of the detail around an individual asset well before it goes live in the app. With our physical presence, the first museum space that we had in Soho was right under our old headquarters, which was on Lafayette Street, right between Prince and Spring. So for anybody who knows New York, that's like the block of Soho where like Supreme was and all the cool restaurants are. And it was just this space where it made no sense to open up a storefront and spend money on rent and put like a Lamborghini in the middle of it and a Mickey Mantle rookie card on one side and a Birkin bag on the other side and make it this mini museum that was just open to the public. But it generated so many of the conversations, and investors and companies that would come in and want to partner with us. When they see how much we care about it and they see the things in person and have a conversation with the founders or with like the senior team there that's been there from day one, I think it makes everything way more obvious that this is what the future looks like. And that's always been a big strength for us, the way that we communicate with users. And when I think about like users and investors and people part of the platform, it's all part of this holistic group of people that care about what we do enough to have the conversation. So we've always been really proactive in trying to make that happen.
Yeah, amazing.
And I would add to that, kind of as I've sort of seen the evolution of, where Rally was when we invested to kind of where it is today. One thing I think that has also grown is the user base that we are targeting. And I think Rally is, started off with these power users, and as Rob mentioned, a couple in California. I mean, I'm sure there are tons in California, but a few of them from the early days. We have power users, and then as they think about democratizing this platform and making assets accessible to others as well, one thing that I think they've done a really good job of, and it's part of sort of as Rob said, the redesign too, is working really closely with marketing to have these like storytelling events around each of the offerings. And so, when there's a new offering coming out of the platform, there's now like webinars, there's a memo, there's ways to learn about the asset itself. The thing with stock trading, or the thing with like intangible, like crypto, for example, there's almost this baseline expectation that you understand that asset class already when you come in as an investor. So if I'm buying like one stock of Google, the expectation is I've done my research. Well, I don't know if the expectation's there, but maybe I just bought the stock of Google and just kind of went and said, hey, like I think Google's going to do well, I'm just going to buy a stock in there. Or it's sort of like, what is the right platform to educate me on how Google's performed, whether it's a good asset for me, whether it's not? That exists in the ecosystem, right? You could go to Wealthfront, you can go to Betterment, you can go to like so many of these like asset managers, you can go to so many platforms that can teach you. I know Robinhood also has like an educational content aspect to their business too. However, with Rally, you're dealing with assets that people don't necessarily understand how to value, how to think about in the market. And what Rally's done an amazing job of is initially these power users totally got it, but as we're starting to grow and expand into talking to people who don't necessarily understand like what does this like 1972 Lamborghini actually go for, and like how do I think about the trading value, the holding value, like where do I see an exit, how do I think of a return? Rally's done the work. Rally's like evolving and thinking about like, hey, we are doing the work to educate our end user that Aditi may never have purchased into any tangible asset, but now if I gave her a little bit of information, she understands, she watches, listens in on a webinar, maybe, decides like, hey, that Lamborghini wasn't the right call. Maybe this high value Birkin is really where she wants to go, because it also resonates with her from a personal brand, personal experience. That's how it should be done. And so I think there's this education piece of Rally that's really been incorporated into the product and into the user experience that I think we're going to see a lot more of too. Sorry to take it away from you, Rob.
No,
but
that's right.
I just think that's like one of the most awesome parts of the
appreciate it.
democratization.
We also stole that we stole a lot of it from Upfront. When Bird scooters launched, they kind of just like put them out in front of the Upfront office, and so it was going to happen. We did the same thing with the app, but then you realize like it would be irresponsible for us, even though the future is going to have some level of decentralization, it would be irresponsible to not take care of the needs of our users. We don't want to just throw them into something now that we're a much bigger company and say, figure it out on your own. That would be an irresponsible thing for us to do as a business.
Well, thank you for being responsible, because we've seen a lot of that, right, in the space
Yeah,
where people are not knowing what they're investing
I don't want to make it a
in or
crazy
doing.
conversation like that.
Yeah.
We can go down a very
a lot's been
different
happening
tangent.
the last week and a half.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, absolutely. Okay, so back to, you mentioned, Aditi and Rob, about how the user has to get educated. It's a little bit different because they may not know the value of a stock like Tesla stock. This is kind of different. So also, how might the relationship with the user and something that's on Rally be different than the relationship or reason for investing in a traditional stock? Does that make sense?
There's a few reasons. The first and foremost, I think, no matter what anybody says, and I'm saying this from experience too, as much as I want to say I'm part of the cult of Apple, or I love a sports team, even though I'll bet on them, I love that team anyway, I just want to see them win. When you think about all these different ways to kind of put your money to use and what we would consider investments or bets or anything in between, there's binary outcome. It's a zero-sum game of make money or don't make money. The emotion that's attached to it comes from that win or that loss. I think what you see on Rally and what we've always tried to build is to make it emotion first. And we never want to say like passion investments. I think that does a bad job of explaining why somebody would put their money to work in an asset on Rally or in an item on Rally. It's passion-led, where you might care about something deeply, or you might only know a little bit about what you read or something you saw on YouTube, or seeing a car on the street, or hearing about the fact that Rolexes are impossible to get at an authorized dealer, or seeing what's happening with Birkin bags. And it's like, I want to know more about that, and all these other people are making money on it. They're being a part of it. Maybe I could do it too. What we've always tried to do is attach emotion to it first. And I think that's what, when you see these epic kind of blow-ups like an FTX or everything that's been happening lately, I think it's almost like that's money only. It's billions of dollars, and some of it goes missing, and there's crazy leverage that goes with it, and there's bad accounting, and there's all these elements that go with it. No one's talking about how much they love, FTX's token. Like, no one's talking about that.
Yeah.
But no matter what, I think when you see an asset on Rally, people make an investment, they're way more open to the understanding of there's going to be fluctuation in the market. It's going to be a situation where something might go to auction and not achieve the exact same price result, but it's not based on crazy multiples. It's not based on just potentially only making money and being mad when you don't. I think a lot of it comes down to tying those aspirations that you had, whether it's nostalgia or whether it's current, to actual equity and ownership and the things that you care most about. And I think that we've been able to bridge that gap, again, by not making it purely transactional, which, for better or worse, every other sort of marketplace that's around the potential for gains is always going to be based on the equivalent of a ticker symbol, a bunch of numbers, and whether or not you're making money.
Yeah, for better, for worse, right?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think from, to Rob's point of like the personal connection, there's also people's passion areas, right? Like, there are people who are passionate collectors of cards. There are people who are passionate collectors of cars, whatever it may be, cards and cars separate. But I also think there's, the 22-year-old woman who just graduated college, works in investment banking, looks at her MDs who are carrying a Birkin, and she's like, man, I wish I could have that. There's this like aspirational part of it that Rally really taps into, is like what you aspire to in some ways. It's, I think the thing with, a ticker is you can own it, and you're not really like, there is no like rare experience. There's no uniqueness around it. It's sort of like, there are millions of other people who own that asset, but there is something about like almost scarcity in the value and also the aspiration of wanting it that kind of gets you like, hey, I'm actually pretty excited to go buy into this like super rare Birkin, and I'm an aspiring fashionista and I like work in investment banking and I'm 22 years old. It's not something I can afford today. Maybe I want something down the road. We'll see. But it is just tapping into such a human, psychology. And I think Rob has done such a good job of capturing the exclusive nature and also the aspirational feeling inside a user to give them access to something that they wouldn't get access to regularly. So there's like a combination of a few different feelings there that I just don't get from buying like a Google stock.
Yeah, from other stock. Yeah, for sure. I've been on rallies. Same thing. I'm like, ooh, like this comic or something. You get really hyped about like something about it. You want to be part of this.
It's working.
Yeah,
totally. Like the kid who says like I bought Apple stock because my grandfather like owned Apple is like, cool. Like that maybe is your personal story.
Yeah.
But like everyone sort of has a personal story with everything that they come into on Rally, which is very cool. Like I know the Kobe, the Kobe
floor that he plays last floor
was like, I mean, it's so meaningful to, one of my partners, Mark Suster, he has a little bit in the Kobe floor. It's like it's a piece of the floor that he last played on, I think at Staples Center.
So meaningful, yeah.
And
for
people in LA, like they're, diehard Lakers fans, they're like, would do anything for that. And like, I feel like Mark is slowly accumulating his like ownership there to eventually like be like, one day when we have a big exit, I'm going to go buy that maybe.
Mark, as an example, has a huge portfolio, I'm sure, of every crypto and equities and everything else. We had that floor on display at an event out here, and he was doing security to prevent people from walking on top of it.
Yeah.
Like he looked at it as something that he really cared about, and that he owned and wanted to be a part of, and that was really, really encouraging to see, and it was a good moment to see it happen.
Right. And that transcends, right? You said stock
100%.
tickers and stuff.
Totally.
It's like that emotional pull for sure.
Yeah, no one's protecting their Apple stock like that.
Yeah, no one
no one's protecting.
totally.
Right? Okay, so Aditi, you mentioned like power users with Rally, but on the other side of that, are you a collector? And if not, how do you think non-collectors on the other side of the spectrum can get excited about a platform like Rally?
Yeah. So I wasn't a collector, and I think now like there has been a conversion. I would say it really taps into the aspiration around sort of like wanting to be part of, getting to own a little piece of the Kobe floor, getting to own a little piece of the Birkin, whatever it may be. So, there's more of it now. I think of myself as like a very traditional trader, and then now kind of getting into this collectibles world. I also think the nice thing about the collectibles world is I don't have to put a lot down. Like, it's not like you're suddenly asking me to put in like, $20,000 to participate, or even $2,000 to participate, right? The ownership, like the inertia is so much lower for me because there isn't such a high cliff where I can participate, and that feels like something Rally does a really good job. I think the key thing to remember is like fractional is such a big part of their mission, and then democratizing it too. So I do think it's a lot more accessible because you don't have to go in with this really high number and be like, okay, I'm coming in for a super high price. So that's how I think Rally does it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So we have a couple more minutes. I just wanted to ask a bigger picture question for Rob. How do you stay true to your vision for Rally, for the company as it evolves? And on Aditi's side, how do you help founders stay true to their vision?
Sure, I'll jump in first. The only way is to build with the vision and with that statement in mind, with our mission statement in mind, which is tying aspirations to equity and democratizing access to all these collectibles at a price point that's comfortable for anybody. For us, it really means thinking about not just the things that we care about, but what potential users care about. So there's, again, like with 25 different categories on Rally, there's some that I'm personally way more interested in than others. And it's easy sometimes to say like, well, we should do that and shouldn't do that. But we have to stick to the base and say, there's a world, like I never was into Magic cards, for an example, but like Magic the Gathering is this massive, massive community of people who show up and come out anytime something is happening around that, making sure that we're staying in the conversations. And even in situations where maybe an asset or an item or a category isn't as liquid at auction or on platforms as maybe some others are, but the conversation is liquid and it's always in conversation. We want to make sure that we're in those conversations and we're always paying attention. That's the only way to really do it, is to think about your current users and what the needs of the future users are going to look like, and to be in that conversation. So, coming out here and meeting new people, being in our retail space or in our pop-ups and meeting as many people as possible, all that is kind of feet on the ground. We make sure that we're in the conversation so we can help at least try and predict what the future might look like based on the expertise and the curation we've done to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo that sentiment, which is like we, as I feel investors in businesses like Rally, I think of us as sort of like coaches, therapists, some hybrid version for our founders. But more than that, I think what is always crucial is just being a mirror and kind of like showing them back like what they aren't seeing, but in a way which is, once you start straying from what your user needs and start building in isolation and starting to think like, oh, I think this is going to be great, but there is no feedback. There's nobody who's given you indication that they care about that. That's when founders start to like stray, especially on consumer products. And so I think just like going back to research, going back to kind of where our users have needs, where they've asked for things, and how do we hear them. So just like we used to call, when I was at Google, we always used to talk about user voice. And that's something I think we talk a lot about with all of our companies. So that's how we kind of focus on keeping them true.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we're lucky we have smart product people around us too, so that always helps.
No, I love that, how you're like, you play therapist, coach.
Yes,
Yeah,
totally.
advisor. And
It's fun. We get to work together, which is the best.
All fact, absolutely.
yeah, I think that concludes today's chat. It's been a
Awesome.
pure joy and honor to chat with both of you.
Likewise.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Rob.